right. Good morning. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties, but do have. Let me see if I can put him on. There he is. We do have a dog. Technical difficulties did persist, but we have a puppy today. And of course, if there were ever going to be technical difficulties, it would be on the last day, right? I mean, that's how this has to work. Exactly, dude. Dude decided that he wanted to come in on the last lecture. He's a very sleepy boy right now. He's a sleepy boy. Alright, so today is, as I mentioned before, last class. Good morning. As mentioned before, this is the last class, and the main purpose of today's class was really just to kind of like have a conceptual wrap-up, right? We've come a long way in talking about political behavior, right? And also to kind of give a couple of quick tips and bits of resources and things like that. Why the but why the long face? To keep some things in mind. Good morning, Kevin. To keep some things in mind as we go forward, because again, a class can only teach so much. So how to become the kinds of people, or how to gather the kinds of sources that allow you to maintain the expertise and mastery and competency that you've developed over the course of this semester, right? So let's do that. Let me move that off and let me get today's media going. Slideshow. Face it. There we go. Okay, so there's a reason why I wanted you guys to send me dinosaurs. So I knew from the very beginning of the semester, the day I started, that I was going the second I put this on the syllabus, that I was like, you know what I'm gonna do on the last day of class, I'm gonna have it so that we have dinosaurs, so that we have dinosaur pictures going on. Let me set the slideshow is gonna be a bit fast, so I can see both YouTube and that. But so yeah, this is today's slideshow. All the awesome dinosaur pictures you guys have sent in over the semester. It's kind of, I feel like it's a nice retrospective. It's a nice way to look back and see all this. I also just thought it'd be a fun way to wrap things up. All right. So let's have a quick chat about what we've learned, where we've come from, where we started from, right? So as I mentioned at the beginning of this course, political behavior, right, is just this wonderfully multifaceted and complex topic that just spans into so many different domains, into so many different behaviors and things. And as we kind of learned at the very beginning, when we asked and we kind of thought about, well, what constitutes political behavior? The Littlefoot nostalgia just hit me like a train. I mean, it's just so good. That just so many things can be considered political behavior, right? And so many things are political behavior, even though a lot of people, when they focus on political behavior, they unfortunately focus too much on just those things that interact with the formal institutions, like voting, like signing petitions or donating, or things that are just oriented around explicitly political things like campaigns. But so many things constitute political behavior, and I'm happy to see that as we were able to go through, we were able to encompass a far broader swath and understanding of political behavior. It can't be time. It can be timeless if it was before time. That's why it is timeless. It is in a state where time did not exist. So it is exactly timeless for that reason. So where did we start? We started with just kind of getting a sense of knowledge and people's knowledge states and things like that. And we learned that in terms of rote knowledge, American populace is kind of lacking on some things, right? But we also learned that, is that really the most important bit of information out there, or is it the most important things that people have, and not necessarily. Just loving the conversations in the chat, always do. So that you have different kinds of things where you can have facts, you can have knowledge, you can have competency, and really what we should, as educators, and as we have been striving for ourselves in this course, has been competency and expertise, right? That's the kind of thing that we've been striving more towards. So we talked about this. We talked about political behavior. We talked about attitudes. We talked about the fact that opinions and things like that, as much as we like to think that we have like small little kernels of opinions and little nuggets just nestled somewhere, like a specific cluster of neurons are responsible for generating our opinions on Carnotaurus, right? The big baddie from Dinosaur. I was really happy to see that. That hit me with a wave of nostalgia when I saw that. Actually, fun fact, the one experience in my life that I'm convinced was like a haunted experience has to do with a stuffed Carnotaurus toy I got when I was at Disney's Animal Kingdom. The one time I ever had like an experience that I, to this day, just consider supernatural and just freaking weird. So this will cycle through a few times throughout the lecture. That there's no little nugget. There's no cluster of neurons that says, hey, here's my opinion about that weird messed up experience I had with Carnotaurus. No, it's memory and opinion and attitudes are ensembles of different neurological processes that are constructed online and live in the face of the prompt, in the face of the question, of the situation that is having us deliver this thing. Is there an attendance form? No, there's not an attendance form, unfortunately. Dinosaur... Chandler, your grade is about to precipitously drop right now. No, I will not stand for this. No. Not this will not stand. The movie was weird. The movie was definitely a little weird. Putting CGI human faces onto dinosaurs, it was a bit strange. It was a bit of a strange the super mutant T-Rex. Oh. I thought you were saying what dinosaur. I thought you were saying like, you know what? Dinosaur really sucked. And I was really angry for a second. But you know what? I can get behind you about the Indominus Rex. Do dinosaurs deserve rights? Let's discuss. Actually, that would be one heck of an interesting conversation to have about, them and all that. But right, the attitudes and opinions, all those sorts of things, are constructed live and online in the moment. Right, so we go from there, and then we go into conceptualizing people is the most basic, fundamental, foundational way that we possibly could, and that's just as pure mathematical objects, right? So we went full physics, basically, in terms of how they conceptualize, electrons and other things like that, really, as point elements that only have pure mathematical features. And we said that's how we're going to think of people, right? Rational choice theory. And we said, okay, well, this works in some ways, and when we inspect most closely the most prominent and predominating models in political behavior, we find that they're lacking, right? That they lack a certain degree of verisimilitude. They lack a degree of verisimilitude. I said it once, and I can't even do that. Do people as pure mathematical objects deserve rights? Let's discuss. Let's. So. Oh man, I am going to miss this class. This class kept me going, honestly. I'm gonna miss it. I'm gonna miss you guys. So we had those, right? And we said, okay, this doesn't quite work. Look at the penguin skeleton, then reimagine what Brachiosaurus must have looked like. Yeah, wild. I also love the chicken. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head who was like, I object because there's no pictures of dinosaurs, but here's their closest relative. And I just died laughing when I saw that. That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible when I saw that. Does this class deserve rights? This isn't like a punditry news show. This isn't whatever, Fox, CNN, MSNBC. We're not gonna have a round table on this. I like to think that all of us after this class have aspired to be greater than pundits. So, nothing wrong with being a reporter. there's wrong with being pundits. I will say that. So, you know, we said we had to complicate this a bit. So how do we complicate it while also keeping it pretty simple? Okay, well, let's say the things are genetically predetermined, right? So we looked at genetics, we looked at our biology, we looked at the things that, you know, seem to be pretty much inherent to us, right? Endemic to us. Hello and welcome to Crossfire. Oof, yeah. We're gonna have a round table on this. Are we greater than pundits? Why are you trying to distract the class? It was already 10 minutes late. It's the last one. I'll be the lady from that one episode of Atlanta. Ay. It can't be a class, right, without being derailed a little bit. It's just not possible, and that's part of this class's charm, I think. At least I think that's part of why I found it fun. Who here thinks that they would survive? Which Jurassic Park are we talking about? Because for sure, I think a lot of people would survive Jurassic Park 2. Most people would survive Jurassic Park 3. Yes, you deserve rights. Most people would survive Jurassic Park 2 and Jurassic Park 3. Here's why. Controversial take. Jurassic Park 2, you're in a city with, you know, the single Tyrannosaur, or not the single because there's a baby T-Rex, right? But you're in a city with really just one apex predator, and it's a pretty large land area, right? You've got a pretty damn good chance of survival as long as you hunker down and don't get and draw attention to yourself with the T-Rex or like actively try to steal its young, right? Jurassic Park 3, you'd most definitely survive because you just have to be smart enough to not go to Isla Sorna, right? You just need to not go to Site B and you'll survive. Yes, okay, no, these are good questions. Brandon and Kevin, good questions. So, last exam, I would suggest the last exam is going to be a higher split from readings than from lecture, and that's to accommodate the fact that not a lot of people could go to lecture live, and that, you know, people have different internet services and things like that. And quite frankly, people are more likely to retain information that they read and they can refer back to, because it is open book and open note for the exam. They're going to retain that information better than they are with lecture materials like this, and in high stress environments. Multiple studies have shown that you know, memory, short-term memory and things like that tends to be performed less in high stress environments, right? Cortisol is a hell of a oh, not a protein. Oh god, what is it? Yeah, I'm spacing on it. Hormone. Cortisol is a hell of a hormone. So it's going to be predominantly from the readings. I'm going to say it's going to be, as opposed to last time, which was like a 60-40 split with 40 being from the lecture, I'm going to say it's probably going to be a 75-25 split. And I'm going to try to have it so that even the stuff that comes from lecture is, you know, stuff that one could reasonably ascertain from the readings. And then final essay, will there be a time limit? I'm inclined to say no at the moment. I also got an email asking me if this was going to be through HonorLock or through the other one. I can't even remember. It's going to be through neither. It's just through Canvas. It's going to look the same as a quiz would, basically, except it's all multiple guess, no fill in the blanks, some true false, and there's going to be no short answer, and it's going to be 40 to 50 questions long, leaning closer to 40, because I want to say that that's as long as I made the first exam, and I'm really not trying to make this any more difficult than the first exam. If anything, you know, trying to recalibrate from the first exam. So this, I would recommend mostly the material from the readings. Again, same as last time, broad strokes. So that would be my recommendation. It is open note and open book. I might put like a 24-hour time limit, you know, just to deal with Canvas, so to deal with stuff on the back end, but otherwise it's de facto, I think you'll be fine. I might open it a day or two early, I'm not sure yet, but once you open it, it's 24 hours. Yes, good question. The missing will be removed. So the missings don't count either for or against you right now, but the missings are going to be removed. The only ones that are going to count are the 3 of the 4, because you had to do 4, the lowest one gets dropped. But yeah, so good question. And then in terms of how to turn a short essay into a longer one, basically my recommendation for that is, you know, when you have to write 2 to 3 pages or 2 to 4 pages on something that's pretty expansive, right? So I gave you guys multiple different questions, knowing that, you know, there is a certain degree of challenge in taking these broader ideas and making them concise, because, you know, concision is an important thing, and learning how to write big ideas concisely is an important skill, and I hope that these sorts of things help develop that. So that's part, you know, but I gave you kind of broad ideas with a relatively limited amount of space. So the idea with the final is that you now have more space to play with these ideas that you had. You have more space to go in depth into your arguments, to really grab the materials from the readings and from the lecture, to add more of your own voice if it's pertinent, right? Like, so to throw in more of yourself into there if and really synthesize that information, you know, to have more arguments, more expansive arguments, right? Basically, the idea is I'm giving you more space to play with the ideas that you talked about in your first essay. So long as it's not copy and pasted, right? So you can have the exact same arguments in terms of, like, qualitatively the exact same arguments. You just don't use the exact same wording. Now, I'm going to, you know, I understand that sometimes once you write something the first time, it's, like, literally perfect. You have a 1 in 1,000 chance of writing a sentence like that, but, you know, it does happen when you write enough sentences, right? And I understand that, like, sometimes you just write something so well the first time when you write it, you don't, you find, like, well, how else am I going to describe it in the second time? So if there are a handful, like I'm literally counting, like, you know, a handful of sentences that are, like, direct copy pasted or direct word for word verbatim from your earlier essays, I'll look over that, I'll look past that, but don't, like, self plagiarize. That makes sense. Will it be during our same class time? Oh, Ariana, for the exam? No, so the exam is going to be during the exam block, but I might make the exam open a couple days earlier, because I've had people tell me that they had issues for one reason or another. So basically, what I'm thinking of doing is that you have, like, it's for sure going to be available on the final day of the day of the final exam, according to the UF test block. For sure, it'll be available on that day. It might also be available, like, a day or two before. And basically, once you open it, you have 24 hours to complete it, regardless of whichever one of those 3 days you do it on. Okay, let me make sure I got all the... Is it only covering the topics after the midterm? Yes, the final is only covering the stuff that we went over after the midterm. Comments on our rough drafts already sent out. I mean, I don't think I got a rough draft from you. I can double check my... I can double check my... I have an email from you that has it, and I assumed it was attached. I'll dig through it a little bit more, because I see an email from you, but I don't see an attachment. I'll send you an email in a little bit. Yeah, no, don't sweat it too much. Resend it to me through email, if you would, okay? Not through Canvas, just through the standard email address. If you were able to do that, then we'll make sure it works. So we can't take our shorter one and add to it. It has to be a whole new one. Yeah, no, so you can't just, like, copy paste. Yeah, so don't take your shorter one and then just, like, add new paragraphs while keeping the exact same paragraphs the same. Like, you can take the same ideas and develop them more, right? But you don't add, like, additional paragraphs into that. Some people do find it easier to pick a different essay. The idea for it was to make your lives a little bit easier, rather than say, okay, you guys have to do it. So the idea of this originally was to make your guys' lives easier, right? Because sometimes I find it sometimes easier to start a new topic entirely. Sometimes I find it easier to go back and revisit one, you know. So the idea is that, you know, in a time of crunch, during normal times generally, like this when I made the syllabus was a far more normal time. that the idea was that for some people, because of work commitments, because of life commitments, and things like that, by the time or because of just all other classes that had far more demanding things onto your plate, it might have been easier for some people to go like, man, I wish I could just expand what I did really well on previously, because that would be great. It was to provide that kind of opportunity, right? Because again, what I'm really looking for here is the ability to synthesize information. The final paper is no different from that. I just really want the difference between the short papers and the final papers is the amount of depth I want to see in the synthesis, effectively. I just got an email. Nope. Okay, thought it was something else. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, are there any other questions about anything else on this? And if there are, just pop them into the chat and I'll go over them as quickly as I can, or I'll go over them as I can. All right. So, what was I saying? So we complicated it. We went to biology, right? And we just continue to expand, right? And I hope that as we expanded up, we went from individual things, then we went to groups, then we went to larger parts of society, then we went from larger parts of society to kind of like parts of the political campaign process. Then from there, we just kind of kept expanding outwards until we finally got to like just the broad tendencies of history itself. And what I really hope you guys get from this class, right, is this concept of an event as well as foreground and background processes. Right, because if you think about the things as we expanded, we were still talking about the same exact stuff that was happening. Like you could see connections from all across all of the different weeks, right? So some of the behaviors and stuff like that we were talking about during history, we also were talking about, during topics of identity, and topics of identity was being talked about during the parts on opinion, and all these sorts of things intertwine with each other, right? So you have this idea that all these behaviors that we talk about here, you can make general conclusions and general tendencies, right? In general, you can stake general claims, right? And when you stake those claims, you're going to have average answers, right? So they're not going to be, you can't, like as I mentioned before, you can't like say, okay, on average, one group does this, one group does another thing, so the individuals of this group all do this and all do that, right? It's all about averages and general tendencies and things like that. But you can make these things these hypotheses that provide or put forward a general tendency, but all these general tendencies are going to be conditional upon background and so foreground and then deep background processes, right? So when we talk about how opinions are being divided along political lenses, right, then you also have to talk about how is the media groups doing that, and once the media groups are talking about that, how are people's friend groups filtering that information, right? How do those things already go along with their pre-existing beliefs and structures and things like that, and the kind of cognitive frames that are generally available to them thanks to, in part, just normal cultural factors within their society. So you have immediately pressing conditionalizing factors, right, that changes these kinds of behaviors. And then you also have the deeper background processes, which I kind of already alluded to a little bit with the culture. So culture could already kind of act like that sort of thing. You can have history be a long-term force acting like that, because there are things that affect the mid-ground factors that also affect the immediate factors, right? Like history, like culture, like linguistic patterns, like a whole bunch of different things that tend to follow evolutionary processes when we look at them over long periods of time, right? So if there was kind of an overarching conclusion that I want you guys to be able to take away from the study of political behavior, right? I've mentioned it in jokes 1.5 million times, because it's harder, it's harder than rocket science because it's always changing, right? That's kind of the gist. It's changing, it's conditional, and it's exciting because of that. You're never going to be without interesting research questions. You're never going to be without things that'll make you scrunch up your face, make you question, make you wonder, make you frustrated, make you tear your hair out. It'll always keep you rapt and attentive, right? And that's kind of, to me at least, the fun of this, right? As much fun as you can have in intellectual pursuits. It's kind of the, it's kind of what grasps me here, as opposed to like going back to school to study dinosaurs. Which again, some days I still want to. Some days I still think about it. Oh, Haley, you're totally fine. There isn't actually attendance today, and the stream itself had some technical issues, and you're totally fine. Don't sweat it. So that's kind of the overarching takeaway from this. So where do we learn more about this as we continue to go forward. Well, so there are a few sources that are better than not, and a few methodologies that are better than not, right? So more often than not, you will end up finding yourself with survey data, right? Survey data tends to be the stuff that's our bread and butter in the social sciences, especially when we talk about behavior, because we're looking at individuals, we're looking at people, so we're kind of using individual level data, so we tend to do surveys. A lot of people are now looking at stuff that doesn't require some sort of user interface, which ultimately all surveys do, right? So you're looking at Twitter data, social media data, looking at cell phone data to try to get better, try to get a more objective taps into behaviors. I don't know if this is already asked, but can we write on a prompt that we didn't submit, or does it have to be a paper we submitted? You are free to write on any topic, is the idea. You can write on any topic you want. If it happens to be one you've already submitted, that's fine, right? So, but any topic you want, as long as it's, as long as it follows the same prompts as any of the other papers throughout the semester, or the other paper opportunities throughout the semester, but any single one you want. So survey data is going to be, where we get most of our bread and butter. Not all survey data is the same, right? So want to look for surveys that try its best as they can to get random samples. Random samples is a more important thing to do than large samples. I will emphasize that 1,000 times over, right, in terms of methodologically speaking. Don't know why I basically slurred methodologically speaking, but in terms of methodologically speaking, large random samples are more important than large samples, but if you can have a large random sample, that's best, right? Large samples, like if you have 3,000 people that's unrepresentative, you got a whole bunch of data, like just trash data. You just magnified the trash, basically. Now, most of the time you can't actually get a purely random sample of things, so that's why people try their best to make it a representative sample, and they use weighting techniques, and they use a lot of different statistical techniques to try to make it so that it is generally representative. But that's really what you want, is you want to have something that's representative of the frame of individuals, the frame of the population, of the kinds of people that you're interested in, and you're looking at survey data, right? Always remember, though, that survey data are imprecise, that they come attached with a confidence interval intrinsically, the margin of error, right? That their point estimates, when they say 73.2%, unless they asked 1 million people, the odds of them being able to get down to the decimal level is very, very small. And also, in general, you don't need to get 1 million people. 1,000 people will do you just fine in terms of survey data, right? So as long as it's as representative and as close as they can get to random, that's really what's important. Look at the questions that they ask, right? Because oftentimes when you read news reports, the questions that are reported in the news is often an interpretation of the actual literal wording in the text that is provided in the questionnaire. And as we talked about when we were talking about attitudes and opinions, people are making these opinions online based upon the prompt, based upon the questions that they are asked, and they are very sensitive to very minute changes in the wording, right? So when you have the opportunity to go ahead and look, and if a survey claims something, if a place like YouGov, well, I mean not YouGov because YouGov tends to be pretty good, but if you come across this thing there was the survey a while ago that people were less likely to drink Corona because of COVID-19, and that was done by a public relations firm, and they never released their results, not their crosstabs, not their data, not their nothing. If an organization is explicitly out there, it's their job to generate attention, and they won't give you the data, just might as well treat that like just hearsay, because it basically is. They probably do have results that give them that, but how much they had to manipulate, massage, and beat the data into giving them the conclusions that they want, it's just, you're better off ignoring it. Transparency is something that a lot of people in the social sciences, especially in the survey world, really emphasize. So if you're finding an organization that doesn't at least try to offer you kind of some crosstabs, not all, because some things are trade secret and some things are proprietary and whatnot, but if you don't have an organization that at least doesn't allow you to get some greater semblance of the data, don't test it, right? Don't bother messing with it. It's better to trust reports that come from established firms like that, right? So from places like Pew, from places like Gallup, then you can have, it's better if you're looking at predictive abilities, especially with surveys. Aggregators are better than not. Real Clear Politics has an aggregator. 538 has an aggregator. 538 tries to do more of a Bayesian kind of thing, for those of you guys who know statistics, in that they try to incorporate prior information and weight it differently, and it's very, very complicated, their model, compared to Real Clear Politics, which is just a very simple polling aggregate. But both of those techniques tend to do pretty well in terms of predicting outcomes, provided that there's enough recent data to actually be able to predict. Right. So surveys are one way to be able to get information about the social world, and the news will often promulgate really, really interesting surveys. So you can look through the newspaper, you can look through other things like that, but when you do, follow the links that they hyperlink to, they say, oh, survey says, hyperlink. Go ahead and click on that link if it's something that interests you, because more likely than not, there's going to be more to it than that. So surveys is one of the predominant sources, but surveys don't give you causality, right? Especially just cross-sectional one-off surveys. They don't do that. There are ways that you can use survey data to get at the concept of causality, right? And one way to do that is through what's called longitudinal surveys or panel studies, which ask the same people questions over time. Pew Research has running panel studies right now. Some academics publish their research and they have panel study researchers, things like that, so they can use longitudinal work to be able to get at the timing, which is helpful when dealing with causality. It's not perfectly perfect in terms of dealing with causality, but it's pretty dang good. So looking at those kinds of things is really, really helpful. Then you have the gold standard, right, which would be experiments. And experiments allow you to be able to really tease into causality, but experiments have the issue in that, especially laboratory experiments, right? Laboratory experiments are weird because you ask people to do a thing that they wouldn't normally do in an environment that they wouldn't naturally do it, and prompt them to think about things that they wouldn't otherwise do, right? But you can at least be damn sure that because of the stimulus that you've given them, that the relationships that you see between conditions, right, you can be pretty damn sure that that is chalked up to the actual thing that you've given them, right, to the actual stimulus that you've given them and that sort of thing. So you can actually really disentangle causality very well with an experiment. But the problem is because experiments have a difficult time translating into reality, that you have to be very careful in how you generalize the findings of an experiment. Oftentimes, if you want to be truly intellectually honest, you have to run multiple experiments, or you have to triangulate that experiment with survey data or with other qualitative data to really kind of dig in nice and deep. That's another way to be able to get good data is to find people who do really good and careful qualitative results, because overall survey results will give you averages and aggregates. Experiments will give you causal paths, and longitudinal data will give you over time trends. But if you want to understand really deeply the mechanics for why these things happen, finding people who actually go and talk and do ethnographic research and qualitative research and interviews and actually kind of get their hands dirty, right? Sometimes literally, that's how you're going to really kind of get a better sense and really grapple with kind of the more human aspect of these human sciences. So again, these are all things that you look for when you see published results. When you see a newspaper say, here's the results, try to look for things that are more like that. Oftentimes people will go up and they'll make overarching broad statements based off of some survey data, right? That they overgeneralize or overextend. Same thing with experiments, same thing with all these other sorts of things, right? So in general, in terms of trusting new advances in scientific research and social scientific research, there are aggregators like phys.org, I want to say. I always call it FIZ or Fizz, depending on how I'm talking, which aggregates press releases. Press releases are also a little dangerous because they sensationalize the findings, but they are good at kind of aggregating these findings across a variety of different domains. There are lots of open source academic journals now. A lot of academic journals are pushing toward, not open source, but toward being open access. So the PLOSes tend to do that. There are a whole bunch of different proceedings journals now that try to do it, so that way that everyday people can actually go in and read the research and things like that. And the good thing about those things is that they're peer reviewed, right? Now, peer review tends to be a pretty good thing about keeping bad things out, although not always. But the problem with peer review is that it also doesn't let a lot of good things in, right? So that's generally a problem with those things. But when you read a peer-reviewed study, you can at least have a pretty good deal of faith that it is deserving of being in the overall information environment. Now, no one individual paper is going to be the last word on any topic, right? Especially in the social sciences, because as I mentioned before, everything is conditional. But, it's a good place to be able to start. So going to a place like phys.org that aggregates these sorts of things, you can often, if there's a specific type of phenomenon that you're interested in the social sciences, there probably is either a journal or a group of people who are interested in that sort of thing, and you can like subscribe to RSS feeds, Google alerts, those sorts of things to kind of keep you more informed. And then you look for how they do the methodologies and things like that. Right. After things that are going through peer review, you can look for preprints, which are often done by experts in the field, whether they be academic, whether it be private sector, public sector, however, that have not been vetted by peer review, but are often of higher quality stuff than you would definitely get in like or more in depth, rather, maybe not higher quality, more higher quality scientific endeavors than you would get in a newspaper article, right? Than you would get in most think pieces, because their core purpose is scientific discovery. Then you could go to places like Pew, like Heritage, like a whole bunch of other places that produce, or like Rand, I'm trying to remember, Brookings. A lot of think tanks will provide white papers and things like that are internally peer reviewed. And generally, you even if the places are biased, right, you can trust that at least the numbers that they're coming out tend to be correct. It's just then you have to question, especially depending on the bias of the group. Like I mentioned, not Brookings, although Brookings seems to be center right. Heritage is definitely farther right. So like, you know, you have a place like Heritage, or you have Nothing Progress. There's a like Data for Progress, which is on the left. And you know, these places will be absolutely correct in the numbers and the studies that they publish. Their methods will probably be quite rigorous and sound, but you know, which questions they ask and which data they answer the questions with tend to be pretty favorable towards the outcomes that they would like to see. So just keep those things in mind. But those sorts of think tanks and organizations are another place to be able to find them. Then you have places like The Economist, The Atlantic, right? That'll be good places where people will think deeply and try to synthesize this, as well as try to put this into the greater context of the current zeitgeist, right, of the moments at the time, the feelings of the time. And that's also very important to try to translocate what the science says with what we're seeing now, right? Because most people aren't just trying to produce for a scientific vacuum apart from the world. We're producing things from the world, often for the world, and having people reading people who like synthesize that is super important. So that's kind of a general gist of how to and where to go and what things to look for when continuing your own individual journeys in discovering things in political behavior and in the social sciences more generally. Because I know this has been a really weird class in general, right? Obviously, a lot of that weirdness is outside of my control. A good portion of it, you know, is within my control. And I am unapologetic of the weirdness that is within my control. But I am sorry that we all had to deal with the weirdness that is outside of our control, right? This has been very trying, and I have just been incredibly impressed with all of you, and you're handling this a lot better than I would have at your guys' point in your careers. I am truly awed, and that's I don't use that lightly. So yeah, I think that's about all that I have, not just for today, but I think that's it. I think that's all I'm at. You guys have tapped me out in terms of my wisdom to dispense. At least in terms of political behavior. As I mentioned before, there is a class I'm teaching next semester on election data sciences that should be open. Enrollment should be fixed. I have no idea how many people are enrolled at the moment. I haven't checked for a couple of weeks. But last time I checked, there were still slots open. If you're interested in being able to apply the tools of of computational social science and of data science towards answering a variety of different questions in elections and in political behavior, that should be an interesting class. Sad. Thank you, and seriously, thank everybody. I sincerely appreciate every one of you, and I mentioned before, this class helped me get through this just as much as anything else. You trying to hit mid with us to sell? I swear to God, though, as soon as we are, if we are, when we get out of social distancing and we are allowed to see people again, if I run into any of you guys, I don't tend to go to Midtown, but if I run into any of you guys, you know, at any of those locations, you know, and you are of legal age, the first round is on me. If you're not of legal age, I'll still buy you a soda or something. Good luck with your daughter. Thank you. I sincerely appreciate all of you. Yeah. I try my best to make downtown. I tend to do a little more downtown. Barcade is my usual haunt when it's open, for obvious reasons. Ooh, cigar bar, not a bad option. Thank you all. If you have any questions, any issues, anythings, please, please feel free to. Happy 420. This whole month has technically been 420, and it's been a sincere disappointment. Alright. Thank you all for everything. I sincerely appreciate you. And I'm glad for those of you guys who have said such kind words. I'm really just glad that this class has been able to be such a positive force. And that really means a lot to me. As I said, any emails, any questions, anything, feel free to don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay, feel free to do so. And just in general, once the class is done and everything, if you come across something in your real life and you're like, oh, this reminds me of that thing Professor Lakari said or whatever, email me, hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. Like that's like the juice that keeps teachers and instructors going, is knowing that our influence persisted outside of this. If any of you guys need letters of rec or anything else like that, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Even if I'm no longer at UF, right? If you need a reference or anything else like that, because ideally I'll be out of UF too in the fall. But if you need letters of rec or if you need a reference or things like that after that point, find me. I will happily help you out with that. All right. If I'm ever in North Carolina, we have another video Wednesday. We actually do not. This is the last one. Wednesday is kind of going to be more extended office hours to talk with some people. Help some people out with some alternative assignments, and so no video on Wednesday. Use the time for your essays and to read and to relax and to and to just keep on keeping on. All right, only one way, in my opinion, to really close out the class though appropriately. We have dude over there. Let me go grab